When I opened my front door that morning, I didn't expect to see a moving truck parked in my driveway or my son and daughter-in-law standing there, smiling like everything was perfectly normal. No phone call, no warning, just there. For a few seconds, I thought I might still be dreaming. The sunlight was too bright, the air too still, and their faces too calm. My son, Daniel, had his hands shoved deep into his pockets, eyes darting anywhere but mine. Beside him, his wife Lila balanced a box labeled Kitchen Fragile, her lipstick too red for that early hour. I stood there, one hand still on the doorknob, heart hammering in my chest. "Morning, Mom," Daniel said softly, as though this were some casual visit. We need to stay here for a while." I blinked. "Stay here? What do you mean, stay here?" Lila let out a nervous laugh, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. "Just for a bit," she said, "until things settle down." Things? What things? Behind them, two movers were already unloading boxes, walking toward my porch like this was all decided long before I opened the door. That was the moment I felt something inside me go still, that sharp, quiet kind of anger that sits just under the ribs. I forced my face into calmness, the kind I'd spent decades perfecting. Then, without a word, I reached for my phone on the console table. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shout. I simply said, "Daniel, step inside. Now." Before that morning, my days followed a gentle rhythm, quiet, steady. A little lonely, maybe, but peaceful. After my husband Richard passed 5 years ago, this house became my anchor. The creak of the floorboards, the smell of his old pipe tobacco still faint in the den, these small things comforted me more than I could ever explain. Most mornings, I'd make myself a pot of coffee, feed the cat, and sit by the window watching the world wake up. I'd tend my garden, visit church on Sundays, and call Daniel once a week. Even if he only answered half the time, Daniel was my only child. A good boy once, gentle, bookish, a bit quiet. But ever since he'd married Lila, things had changed. She was beautiful, I'll give her that. The kind of woman who always smelled faintly of perfume and control. I never quite knew what to say around her. She made every conversation feel like a test. Daniel seemed to shrink around her, speaking less, smiling less. But love, or whatever they called it, can make you blind to a lot of things. Still, I stayed polite. I told myself that's what a mother does, supports from a distance, even when the distance feels like a punishment. The last time they visited before the moving truck incident, it had been Christmas. Lila complained about the size of the guest room, saying the wallpaper made her claustrophobic. Daniel didn't say much, just kept refilling her wine glass while she scrolled through her phone. I remember standing by the sink afterward, staring at the lipstick stains on the rim of her glass, and wondering when my son's laughter had disappeared. So when I saw them that morning uninvited, with boxes and movers and that tight smile on Lila's face, a part of me knew this wasn't just about needing a place to stay. Something was wrong. Inside, I motioned for them to set the boxes in the foyer while I put on a pot of coffee. My hands moved automatically the way you do when your mind is spinning. The smell of freshly ground beans filled the kitchen, warm and familiar. Daniel sat at the table, elbows on his knees, head down. Lila scrolled on her phone, pretending not to notice my silence. Finally, I said, "So, who wants to tell me what's going on?" Daniel sighed. "It's complicated, Mom. Try me." Lila glanced at him, then at me. "We had to move out of the apartment. It was just not working out anymore." "Not working out?" I asked. "With the landlord?" "With everything," she said, her tone clipped. "We'll explain later. We just need to stay here for a bit, until we figure things out." I looked at Daniel. His eyes were tired, older somehow. He didn't meet my gaze. "How long is a bit?" I asked. He swallowed hard. "A few weeks, maybe a month." "A month." I smiled, a small practice thing that didn't reach my eyes. Then I poured the coffee and said, "Of course. You're my son. You'll always have a place here." But inside, I was already planning to make a few calls, because I've learned that when someone shows up at your door with a moving truck and a story full of holes, you don't just make coffee. You start listening. And you watch. That night, after they'd settled in the guest room, I couldn't sleep. From down the hall, I could hear muffled voices, Daniel's low, pleading tone, and Lila's sharp replies, the kind that cut through walls. I turned off the lamp and stared into the dark. Something had brought them here, something they didn't want me to know, and I was going to find out what it was. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of drawers opening and closing in the kitchen. The smell of burnt toast drifted down the hallway. For a second, I thought maybe Daniel had decided to surprise me with breakfast, like he used to when he was little. But when I walked in, it wasn't Daniel. It was Lila, standing barefoot in one of my husband's old shirts, the one I'd kept folded in the laundry room, soft with time, smelling faintly of cedar and something that still felt like him. She was humming to herself, scraping blackened toast into the sink. "Oh, good morning," she said, turning around like she hadn't just dug through my things. "I couldn't find anything to wear, so I borrowed this. Hope that's okay." I smiled tightly. "It's fine," I said, "but next time, maybe ask—" She tilted her head, smiling like someone used to getting their way. "Of course," she said, and went back to the toast. Daniel walked in a minute later, hair messy, eyes tired. "Morning, Mom," he said. He looked at the toast, sighed, and reached for the coffee pot. The silence was thick. You could almost hear the air straining between us. "So," I said finally, sitting down at the table, "you two plan to look for a place soon?" Lila didn't look up. "We're just trying to get our footing," she said. "Things have been stressful lately." Daniel's jaw tightened. "We're handling it, Mom." I nodded slowly. "Handling what?" He froze mid-sip. "It's complicated." There it was again, complicated. That word people use when they're hiding something behind it. After breakfast, I watched them from the garden. Lila sat on the porch steps, talking animatedly on the phone. Her voice carried, light and sharp. "I caught snippets. No, she doesn't suspect, and it's just temporary." My chest tightened. Daniel, meanwhile, was in the shed, rummaging through boxes I hadn't touched in years. Old Christmas decorations, Richard's tools, the forgotten clutter of a life lived too fast. When I asked what he was looking for, he said, "Just a hammer." Only, he wasn't holding one when he came out. That night, I checked. The small lockbox that Richard had left me, the one where I kept his letters, a few savings bonds, and the deed to the house was gone from the shelf in the shed. The air left my lungs, but I didn't confront him, not yet. Instead, I told myself I'd wait, I'd watch. And when the truth came out, because it always does, I'd be ready. Over the next few days, the house stopped feeling like mine. Lila rearranged the living room to make it feel brighter. She replaced my floral curtains with something more modern. My framed wedding photo disappeared from the mantel, replaced by one of her and Daniel on a beach somewhere, smiling in a way that didn't look real. Daniel barely spoke. He spent long hours outside, pacing, on his phone, sometimes driving off without explanation. When I asked, he'd say, "Just taking care of things." One evening, while setting the table, I noticed he'd left his phone charging on the counter. The screen lit up a text preview from a number I didn't recognize. "She won't know. Just trust me. After the transfer, it's done." I stood there, frozen. Transfer. I'd seen enough to know when someone was in trouble or up to something worse. Later that night, I brought it up gently. "You've been quiet, Daniel," I said, folding towels in the laundry room. "You can talk to me, you know. Whatever's going on, I can help." He looked at me, then really looked at me, and for a flicker of a second, I saw the boy I'd raised. Then he turned away. "It's nothing, Mom, just some business stuff. It's fine." But it wasn't fine. I could hear it in his voice. That hollow sound of someone trapped in their own lie. 2 nights later, I woke to the sound of the back door closing, quietly, too quietly. Through the window, I saw Daniel outside, crouched near the shed with a flashlight. His movements were quick, nervous. I slipped on my robe and watched from the shadows, heart pounding. He was digging into the patch of soil behind the shed, the one where Richard and I had buried a tin box years ago, filled with small keepsakes and one old checkbook from the early days of our marriage. When he walked back inside, I waited until he was asleep before going out. The dirt was fresh, uneven, the The box was gone. By then I knew. Whatever Daniel and Lila were hiding, it wasn't just about a lost apartment or a bad landlord. It was about money, and something told me my house, my quiet little life, was part of their plan. The next morning I made pancakes. I smiled. I asked about their plans, their future, their dreams. I made conversation like any loving mother would, and while I did, I placed my phone beside my coffee cup and quietly hit record, because I was done being left in the dark. When I pressed record that morning, I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, maybe just proof that I wasn't imagining things. But the moment I hit play that evening, alone in my room with my back against the headboard, I realized I'd captured more than I expected. Lila's voice came through first, crisp, impatient. "He won't even question it, Daniel. He trusts you. Just get her to sign the papers and we can finally move forward." Then Daniel's voice, quieter. "I don't want to trick her, Lila. She's my mom. It's not tricking. It's practicality. We need collateral, and she's not using the property anyway." Collateral, property, my breath caught. They weren't just staying temporarily. They were planning something that involved my home. The place Richard and I built together, brick by brick, back when Daniel was still riding his tricycle on the front path. I paused the recording, my hand trembling. My eyes fell on the photo frame by my nightstand, the three of us, smiling on Daniel's high school graduation day. How did we get here? I'd given that boy everything I had. I'd raised him with patience, with grace, with all the love I knew how to give. And now he was sitting in my kitchen, plotting to take the roof from over my head. The next few days, I pretended not to know. I made meals. I smiled when Lila criticized my old-fashioned furniture. I let Daniel borrow my car when he said he had errands. But quietly, I started collecting things, small, meaningful things. My marriage certificate, the deed copy, bank statements, and every financial record I could find. I hid them under the loose floorboard in the hall closet, right where Lila had once complained about the old house smell. Meanwhile, their behavior shifted. Lila spent long hours on her laptop, whispering on the phone, sometimes stepping out to take calls near the fence. Daniel, on the other hand, grew quieter, more distant, almost guilty. One evening, while I was washing dishes, he came up behind me. "Mom," he said softly, "Lila and we've been looking into something that could help all of us." I turned off the faucet. "All of us?" He nodded, hesitant. "There's this investment loan against the property. We'd use it to start a business. Once things take off, we'd pay it back, of course." "Why?" "O'd still own the house, technically." "Technically?" I repeated, my voice steady but sharp. Lila walked in, cutting him off. "It's a win-win, really," she said with that bright, polished smile. "You've got all this equity sitting here doing nothing. Why not let it work for the family?" I dried my hands slowly, staring at the towel like it held the answer to everything. "I see," I said finally. "And what happens if it doesn't work for the family?" Lila laughed, a light, airy sound that made my stomach turn. "You're such a worrier. Trust us, it'll be fine." I met her eyes. "I used to trust you." Her smile faltered for just a second before she turned and left the room. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I sat at the edge of my bed, hands clasped, whispering a prayer I hadn't said in years. "Lord, give me wisdom." Not anger, just wisdom. Because I knew if I let anger lead, I'd lose more than just a house. I'd lose my son completely. The next morning, I found a manila folder sitting on the kitchen counter. Lila had left early for a meeting, and Daniel was out. The folder had my name neatly written on it. Inside were printed forms, loan applications, title transfers, and signature lines highlighted in yellow. At the bottom of the page, typed neatly, "Primary residence, 142 Pinewood Drive, my home." The papers claimed it as collateral for a $180,000 loan under Daniel and Lila Hastings Enterprises. And in the corner of the last page, a faint signature line marked, "Homeowner, mine." A pen lay beside it. I stared at that space for a long time, my hands trembling. Then I heard Lila's car pulling up outside. Without thinking, I slid the folder into the oven drawer beneath the unused pans and sat at the table, pretending to read the newspaper. When she walked in, she looked different, nervous. Her eyes darted to the counter, then back to me. "Morning," she said, her voice too light. "Morning," I replied, folding the paper. "Coffee's fresh." She poured herself a cup, watching me over the rim. "You know," she started casually, "Daniel's under a lot of stress. We've been trying to build something that'll help us all. He just needs your support right now." "My support," I repeated, each word deliberate. "Yes," she said, "he's trying to do the right thing." "By forging my signature?" Her cup froze midair. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then she forced a laugh. "What? No one's forging anything. Don't be ridiculous. I heard the recording, Lila." Her hand trembled slightly before she set the cup down. "You recorded us?" "I did." She took a deep breath, her face tightening. "You don't understand. Daniel's in debt, a lot of it. He didn't tell you because he didn't want to worry you. I'm just trying to help." "Help," I said softly. "By taking my home?" "It's temporary," she said quickly. "Once the business is stable." I stood then, quiet but certain. "I want you both out by Friday." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "I've loved you like family," I said. "I've bitten my tongue, smiled when I wanted to scream. But this house, this home, it's all I have left of your father, and I won't sign it away for your schemes." Lila's eyes went cold. "Daniel won't leave," she said flatly. "He's your son. He knows you wouldn't kick him out." I looked at her, and for the first time I realized she truly believed that she didn't know me as well as she thought. That night, I called someone I hadn't spoken to in years, my husband's old lawyer, Harold. His voice was gravelly but kind. "Marion," he said, "it's been a long time. What's going on?" I told him everything, the recording, the documents, the threat. He sighed deeply. "You did the right thing calling me. Don't confront them further. I'll handle the paperwork. And Marion." "Yes? Make sure your will is updated, just in case." His words sat heavy in my chest long after I hung up. By Thursday, the air inside the house felt tight, like every wall was holding its breath. Daniel barely spoke to me, and when he did, his voice was brittle, rehearsed. Lila acted as though nothing had happened, humming while she packed boxes of my kitchenware for better organization. But I noticed small things. The whispered arguments behind closed doors, the stack of unopened mail with credit notices addressed to Daniel, the way Lila's eyes darted to my desk drawer whenever I left the room. I'd lived long enough to know that people on the verge of losing control often make desperate choices, and desperation, I could sense, had already set in. Friday morning arrived cold and gray. I woke early, made coffee, and stood by the window watching the moving truck from days ago still parked in my driveway, a silent reminder that my peace had been interrupted. The knock came around 9, 3 firm taps. When I opened the door, there was Harold, my late husband's lawyer, in his gray overcoat, holding a briefcase and an envelope. He smiled gently. "Morning, Marion. May I come in?" I nodded, stepping aside. The moment Daniel and Lila saw him, their faces shifted. Daniel went pale. Lila's eyes narrowed like a cat cornered. "This is Mr. Greaves," I said calmly. "He was your father's attorney. I asked him to stop by for a quick visit." Lila straightened her posture. "What for?" "To clear up some confusion," Harold said, his tone polite but firm. He placed a small folder on the table. "Mrs. Hastings's property. This house is legally protected under a surviving spouse clause. No one, including family, can use it as collateral without her explicit notarized consent." Daniel swallowed hard. "We weren't going to." Harold cut him off, eyes steady. "I've already spoken to the county registrar. Someone attempted to file loan documents with a forged homeowner signature 2 days ago. We've blocked the filing, but there's a pending report. It would be best if you clarified who submitted those papers." Lila's face flushed. "That's ridiculous. We never." "Lila," Daniel said quietly, his voice cracking. "Stop." She froze, her mouth tightening. "Daniel," Harold said, "you're listed as co-applicant. Do you understand the legal implications?" My son's eyes met mine. And in that moment, the shame, the fear, the boy I once held in my arms, all of it flickered behind his expression. "I didn't know she'd already filed it," he whispered. "She said it was just a draft. She said—" Lila spun on him. "You're blaming me now? I trusted you, Lila." he shouted, his voice raw. "You said it was just paperwork for the business." Their argument spiraled, voices overlapping, accusations flying. I stayed silent, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. When the shouting stopped, the room went still except for the sound of Lila's shaky breathing. "Daniel," I said softly, "I need you to listen to me. You can fix this, but it has to start with honesty." He sank into a chair, his shoulders slumped. "I messed up, Mom. The debts. They're bad. I thought we could handle it. But Lila..." Lila grabbed her bag, eyes blazing. "I don't need to listen to this. You're all acting like I'm the villain here." Then she stormed out, slamming the door so hard the windows rattled. The silence afterward felt endless. Harold exhaled and adjusted his glasses. "I'll make sure she can't touch any part of your estate," he said quietly. "You'll need to file a restraining order if she returns." I nodded, feeling both relieved and hollow. When he left, Daniel was still sitting there, staring at the floor. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. "I should have protected you." I pulled out the chair beside him, sitting down slowly. "No, Daniel, you should have protected yourself from her, from the choices that made you forget who you are." He looked up, eyes red. "I'll leave if you want me to." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. "You're my son. I won't throw you out. But you have to rebuild trust one step at a time." He nodded, silent tears slipping down his face. For the first time in months, I saw the boy who used to run into my arms after school, one who believed home was a safe place. Maybe, just maybe, he still could. That weekend, the house was quiet again. Lila didn't come back. Daniel spent his days cleaning, fixing small things, the squeaky door, the leaky faucet. I could tell he was trying to make amends in his own quiet way. On Sunday, I found him in the backyard, shoveling dirt over the patch he'd once dug up. He looked up when he saw me, guilt softening into exhaustion. "I buried something stupid there," he said. "Debt papers. I burned them this morning." I nodded. "That's a start." He smiled faintly. "I don't deserve your forgiveness. Maybe not yet," I said, "but you deserve a chance to earn it." We stood there for a long time, the cool breeze carrying the faint scent of wet soil and distant pine. It felt like the first clean breath after a storm. Still, I knew this wasn't over. Lila wasn't the type to disappear quietly, and I was right. 3 days later, I received an envelope in the mail, no return address, just my name written in looping script. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "If you think you've won, think again. Daniel was never yours to control. He'll come back to me, and when he does, everything you've built will fall with him. No signature." But the scent of her perfume clung to the page, that same sharp sweetness that had filled my kitchen weeks before. I folded the letter, placed it in a drawer, and whispered to myself, "Not this time," because I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd spent too long shrinking to make peace with people who mistook kindness for weakness. That version of me was gone, and if Lila came back, she'd find a mother who'd learned to fight quietly, but fiercely. I didn't tell Daniel about the letter right away. He'd finally begun to look rested, to eat without guilt weighing on his shoulders, and I didn't want to drag him back into the mess she'd left behind. But peace built on silence never lasts. The following week I noticed strange things again, small, easy-to-miss details. The back gate latch left open. Footprints by the garden path after a night of rain. And once, while walking back from the mailbox, I caught the faint smell of that same perfume, faint but unmistakable. She was hovering, watching, and my son, though he didn't admit it, felt her presence too. He'd glance at his phone when it buzzed, then quickly flip it over. Once I saw her name flash across the screen, Lila. He didn't answer, but the silence between us afterward was heavier than any argument. It was a Tuesday afternoon when everything came to light. Daniel had gone into town to meet with Harold, tying up the legal mess Lila had left behind. I was in the kitchen making soup when I heard the rumble of an engine in the driveway. Through the window, I saw her, Lila, stepping out of a sleek black car, sunglasses on, lips painted that same defiant red. She didn't knock. She just walked right up the porch and opened the door like she still belonged there. "Well," she said with a smile, "aren't you going to say hello?" I turned off the stove, keeping my voice calm. "You're not welcome here, Lila. Please," she scoffed. "You think a little paper from your lawyer scares me? Daniel belongs with me. He always will. You forged my signature, tried to steal my home, and now you come waltzing back here?" She smirked. "You can call it what you want. I call it survival." Before I could reply, the front door opened again. Daniel walked in, holding a folder, freezing the moment he saw her. "Lila," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Danny," she said, stepping toward him, softening instantly. "You don't belong here playing handyman for your mother. You and I have plans, remember?" He stepped back. "No, we're done. Are we?" she said, pulling out her phone. "Because the police might not agree. You forged her name too, Daniel. Or did you forget that part?" My heart lurched. "That's a lie," I said sharply. She shrugged. "Prove it." The room was silent, just the low hum of the refrigerator, and the sound of my own pulse in my ears. Then, from behind her, a deep voice spoke. "We'll handle that." It was Harold again, standing at the doorway with a uniformed officer. He'd apparently come early for his meeting with Daniel. The officer stepped forward. "Lila Hastings, you're under investigation for attempted fraud and forgery. We'd like you to come with us." Her face went pale. "You can't be serious." "I am," Harold said, adjusting his tie. "I filed the report myself, and Marion provided audio evidence." For a moment she looked like she might scream, but instead she laughed. A strange, bitter sound. "You think you've won?" she said to me, her voice trembling with rage. "He'll hate you for this. You'll die alone in this house, just like you deserve." Then the officer took her by the arm, guiding her out the door, as her words echoed through the hallway. When the car drove away, Daniel sat heavily on the couch, burying his face in his hands. "I didn't want this," he said, his voice cracking. "I didn't want any of it." I sat beside him, placing my hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes love blinds us, Daniel. But the truth, it always finds its way through." He nodded, tears running silently down his face. Outside, the sirens faded into the distance. The house was quiet again, painfully, beautifully quiet. Over the next few weeks, news spread. Small towns always have big ears, and soon everyone knew about the attempted fraud, the arrest, the betrayal. At church, people whispered kindness, some pity, some admiration. "You're so strong," they'd say. But strength isn't something you choose. It's what's left when you have no other choice. Daniel faced his share of shame, too. A few of his old friends kept their distance, unsure how to approach him. But the ones who mattered stayed. They reminded him he wasn't beyond redemption. I could see him changing. He started helping at the community center, fixing furniture, mentoring local kids. Sometimes I'd find him in the garden at dusk, staring at the horizon, hands deep in the soil. Like he was planting something more than seeds, maybe hope. One evening, about a month after Lila's arrest, he brought me tea. We sat on the porch as the sun sank behind the trees. The air smelled like jasmine and rain. "Mom," he said quietly, "do you think people like her ever really change?" I took a sip of tea before answering. "Maybe. But not because we want them to. They have to want it themselves." He nodded slowly. "I used to think she needed me to save her." "And now?" I asked. He looked out at the fading sky. "Now I think maybe I needed saving too." The truth in his words broke something open in me, not pain this time, but peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop fighting the past. For the first time in a long while, I reached for his hand, and he didn't pull away. The months that followed were quiet, almost unnervingly so. After the storm of deceit, lawyers and heartbreak, the stillness felt foreign, like the air before dawn, holding its breath. Lila was out of our lives, but the shadow she cast lingered. Every creak in the hallway, every unexpected letter in the mail made my heart jolt. I'd grown too used to fear. It takes time to unlearn that. But life, it turns out, has a gentle way of stitching itself back together. Daniel started teaching carpentry classes at the local youth center. The same hands that once built lies now built shelves and benches, small things, useful things. I'd watch him leave each morning, lunchbox in hand, and feel something close to pride stir in my chest. I began baking again, too. The kitchen smelled like it used to, butter, cinnamon, and the soft hum of an old gospel tune under my breath. Sometimes I'd pack extra slices for his students, and he'd tease, "You're trying to spoil them like you did me." Maybe I was. The house no longer felt haunted, just lived in. It was early spring when the letter came. No name on the envelope, just a return address from a correction. DIL facility 2 towns over. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Marian, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect you to read this. But I needed you to know I'm sorry. I thought I could outsmart the world. I thought love was ownership and manipulation was power. But now I see it was fear. I was afraid of being nothing. Daniel didn't deserve what I did to him. Neither did you. I don't know if I'll ever be the kind of woman who deserves peace, but I'm trying to be the kind who earns it. Tell him I finally understand what love isn't. Lila." I sat with that letter for a long time. Then, quietly, I folded it back and placed it in my dresser drawer, not out of sight, but not on display either. Just resting. That night I told Daniel about it. He didn't say much, just nodded and looked out the window for a while. Then he whispered, "I hope she means it." "Me too," I said, and that was all we needed to say. By summer, the garden had come alive. The same patch of earth where Lila once tried to dig up the roots of our peace now burst with daisies and lavender. Daniel built a wooden bench under the oak tree, carved with one simple word: renewal. We'd sit there most evenings, watching the sky turn amber, listening to the hum of crickets and the soft, steady rhythm of a life no longer running from itself. Once, he said quietly, "You know, Mom, when we first came here with that moving truck, I thought I was saving her." I smiled faintly. "And now?" He looked out over the garden. "Now, I think you were saving me." I reached over and brushed a bit of dirt from his sleeve. "We save each other, Daniel. That's what family does." He smiled, and for the first time it reached his eyes. Late that August, I visited the cemetery where my husband rested. I brought fresh flowers, white lilies, his favorite. "I kept my promise," I whispered, setting them down. "I kept the house standing. And our boy, he's finding his way again." The wind picked up just then, soft and cool, rustling the leaves like a sigh of approval. When I turned to leave, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not sadness, not regret, but release. It's strange, isn't it? How the things that nearly break us are sometimes the ones that teach us to bend. I used to think survival was about holding on, but maybe it's also about letting go of guilt, of anger, of the need to be right. Lila's story ended behind cold gray walls, but ours kept growing under open skies. Sometimes, when the evening light hits just right, I see Daniel laughing in the yard, sleeves rolled up, dirt on his hands, and I think this is what healing looks like. Not perfect, not polished, but peaceful. And that peace, after everything, feels like a miracle I no longer have to earn.